Hey, what's up everyone? It's Justin at Saltstrong, and this video is going to be a closer look at the Daiwa Coastal SV TW. There's a lot of features that are packed into this little baitcaster specifically for inshore saltwater fishermen, so I want to take a closer look at the specs that this reel offers, as well as compare it to another reel that's very similar in nature, but a lot of people might have not thought was a good saltwater option, and that's the Tatula SV TW. Both of those reels have a lot of similarities, but there are a few key differences that the Coastal SV offers that the Tatula doesn't, and that's what we're going to break down for you guys in this video. We're going to take a look here briefly at the specs of the reel. So zooming in, the Coastal SV TW 150XS, this is their highest gear speed ratio model that they make in the series. It is an 8.1 to 1 gear ratio. That is a very fast baitcaster. We're looking at 33.9 inches of line brought back onto the spool per every full turn of the handle. Now, some fishermen might look at that and say, well, you know, it's too fast for my style of fishing. And that's okay. There's some guys out there that want that 6.3 to 1 or slower gear ratio, and they're probably presenting lighter, smaller, soft plastics, finesse application techniques, and they're wanting to stay in the strike zone a little bit longer. But if you're a power fisherman, like you're throwing paddle tails all day long or gold spoons, you're looking for redfish and trout, you're trying to cover as much ground as possible, this 8.1 gear speed might be the style for you. Now, taking a look at the weight of the reel, 6.9 ounces is pretty lightweight, all things considered. This is a solid aluminum-bodied baitcaster. There's a number of different things that Daiwa has done to this reel to maintain that sub 7-ounce weight. The biggest thing, naturally, is their SV concept, which stands for stress-free versatile concept. We're going to dive into that a little bit later, but essentially, it is a lighter weight and thinner bodied aluminum spool. It helps with, better control and manipulation with the magnetic braking system, and it's just going to help reduce the weight overall. It's going to help you have a little bit better control when you're casting a variety of different lures. So looking at the drag output of the reel, 11 pounds of drag. Now, I mentioned in the Tatula baitcast video a couple months back that 11, 12, 13 pounds in a baitcaster is more than enough for many applications. And a lot of that has to do with the design of how line comes on and off a baitcaster. It just comes on straight, and when drag is engaged, it's coming straight off the spool, as opposed to a spinning reel that comes on at a 90-degree angle. You kind of have that mitigating factor on a spinning reel. So 11 pounds of drag is more than enough. Seldom are the times that you're going to need to put out more than 6 or 8 pounds during a fight. So I'd say that's perfectly fine, but for those that are looking at it strictly as a number, yes, it is significantly less than other spinning reels that tend to be able to put out, 20 plus pounds of drag nowadays. Now looking at the bearing count here on the end, we've got 7 ball bearings and plus 1 here in the anti-reverse bearing inside the reel. And what's nice is that 2 of those bearings are Daiwa's CRBB, which is their corrosion resistant ball bearings. They're 12 times more resistant to the elements, so they're going to last that much longer. They're in key locations, likely there at the spool itself. This type of reel, it can take getting a splash, it can take exposure to saltwater elements, and it's going to last long term. And finally, when it comes to line capacity, they're using a J-braid base for their conversion, but the diameter thickness of 20 pound, 30 pound to other manufacturers' braids are pretty close. So we're looking at 20 pound, it can hold about 200 yards, give or take, and 30 pound, it can hold 165 yards. Again, these 150 size spools, they hold more line. So saltwater guys that were looking for that increased line capacity if they plan on tackling a bigger fish, this is just a nice feature that Daiwa incorporated here into the Coastal. And now on to the cool part, which is we're going to talk about the features that this little reel offers to inshore saltwater anglers. So first off is Daiwa's SV spool design that we've talked about a couple different times. I went into it at length in the Tatula SV TW video. SV, again, stress-free, versatile, and what that is Daiwa uses a very lightweight aluminum, very thin spool, and they have an induct rotor. You know what? We're going to take the side plate off, and I'll show you guys. I'm going to take this screwdriver, and this magnetic brake system has a little screw here on the side. Once you loosen that off real good, you don't have to worry about that screw popping out. Once that's loose, you can take the side plate, slide it downward, and very carefully manipulate and pull back that side plate. What's happening right now, see, the spool was catching on the magnetized plates here on the side, so I just want to be really careful to not pull it out together. This is Daiwa's SV concept design of their spool. I'm going to set this down to start, and we're going to take this spool out and talk about each part and piece. So the SV spool is very, very thin and lightweight, and what Daiwa is doing is they're using this induct rotor right here. You kind of see it can go out and in, like out and in a little bit. So this induct rotor works in conjunction with these magnetized rings. And based on your braking setting, whether I want to go more or less, the rings will come out further or they'll recess in depending on what setting you're at. And that induct rotor is going to work in conjunction with those magnetized rings. And that in turn is going to be what helps slow down and provide braking to the spool itself. This lightweight spool allows for it to be manipulated much easier and with better control of this magnetic system. It's really, really cool, guys. So if you do want to present lighter, smaller, soft plastics, you have the option to do so on this SV spool. And if you want to cast a greater distance with less effort or less manipulation, this is a great concept for that. The coolest thing of this spool design is that it helps mitigate backlash, the dreaded backlash that baitcast guys get frustrated with. If you're a seasoned baitcast user, it might be a moot point for you because you've been doing it for so long. But for those guys that are wanting to branch out and get into throwing baitcasters, a Daiwa SV spool does help prevent you from getting that bird's nest in your spool and wanting to throw the whole thing into the Gulf. So what I'm going to show you guys is a quick clip from our Tatula baitcast video review. And I did 9 out of 10 casts with a big 5-inch paddle tail. I had my thumb completely off the spool and I did not backlash. That's impressive. I'm not saying that this is the end-all be-all and answer to all of your problems as a baitcast fisherman, but it certainly helps. It helps in a pinch. You don't have to worry as much about manually manipulating your thumb to hold that spool down. When you get the setting just right on the brakes here at the side plate, these magnetic brakes, and you get your cast control set just right to where that spool is there's very little manipulation in the spool. It's just tight enough. You don't have to worry about backlash. It's a really unique design. And just a quick note about the acronym here in this reel, the TW aspect. That stands for Daiwa's Twing System. And what it is it's this level wind aperture up front here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just press down the cast button, and you can kind of see this level wind drops down and it looks like an upside down coat hanger, right? Well, Daiwa's concept is that as line is coming off the spool on the cast, it doesn't have to work its way through a small round hole like what's on a traditional baitcaster. That increase in space is going to help make sure there's not as much friction when the line is peeling off the spool left to right, because when you're turning the handle, the line lays on the spool left to right. So let's say, for example, this line aperture, this level wind is all the way over to the right side of the reel. The reel is inverted, so this is the right side. So when I go to cast and this aperture drops down, if this was just a traditional level wind like on other bait casters, and the line was all the way here on the left side of the reel, it would have to come at a 45-degree angle and through that small space. And as the line is peeling off the spool, it would create unnecessary friction. So this is ultimately going to help you increase your casting distance because there's not as much friction as that line moves left and right and makes its way out of the level wind. Now, on the same topic of cast control and cast manipulation, Daiwa does include their zero adjust tension knob here on the Coastal SV TW. This is on some of their newer series of baitcasters, some 2020 models and above. This zero adjust here, as you can see, it's a really small dial. The idea is that fresh out of the box from the manufacturer, there's very little manipulation that needs to be done to help make sure you preset that spool. Right now, I've got a little bit of jiggle, so I can go forward ever so slightly, and I'll eliminate a lot of the movement here in the spool itself. So to make sure that you have proper tension setting, Daiwa's already preset that here with their zero adjust knob. Just a nice little feature so you don't have to tamper with that all that much. And finally, rounding out the last two main features on this Coastal SV reel, the first being a deeper spool design. So some of the other SV spools that Daiwa makes, this is a spool for a 150 size baitcaster, but the body is a 100 size. So as those numbers get higher, 100, 200, 300, 400, the baitcaster itself and the spool is going to get bigger. But sticking with a 100 size, it's very palmable, it's very compact and comfortable to fish with, but you have a 150 size spool, so it's going to hold more line, something important that some saltwater guys really wanted for targeting bigger fish. And the second and final feature is that length of the handle arm. This is a 100 millimeter swept handle, a little bit longer than the 90 millimeter swept handle on the Tatula SV TW, which also has a shallower spool, holds less line. This is more so ergonomic. It's not going to help the reel perform any better. It's going to help it feel more comfortable because that distance of that handle is further away from the reel. So you have a compact body and you have a handle arm that's going to take this hand further away from the reel. So it's going to feel like you have more cranking power. Just an ergonomic touch and a nice feature added to the series. I do think it's important to do a quick comparison of the Coastal SV TW to what I like to call the little brother to the Coastal, and that is the Tatula SV TW. Now, both of these reels, if you were to tear them down and look at the makeup, the integrity and construction of both reels are actually very similar to one another. They both offer SV spools, they're both magnetic braking systems, they both come with Twing System, they both have 2 CRBB, corrosion-resistant ball bearings here at the spool. They're both, believe it or not, designed for saltwater fishing. A lot of people might not think that the Tatula is a good saltwater baitcaster, and it really is. It is sealed moderately well. It has improved bearings. It's good for most inshore applications. But I do think the Coastal SV does offer some added features that some saltwater guys are looking for, and that's kind of what I want to talk about here in this part of the video. The first difference being in the spool depth. The Coastal SV TW does have a deeper spool than the Tatula SVs. You're going to have more braided line capacity on the Coastal than you will the Tatula. The second being the cast knob. You have a zero adjust cast knob here on the Coastal that's preset from the factory directly from Daiwa, and you have more of a traditional cast control knob here on the Tatula. Me personally, I actually like this style better. This zero adjust, I do think requires a little bit of manipulation, and it's very, very tight. So there's little tolerance to play with. You can pretty easily toggle this forward and backward on the Tatula, and I just like that ease of tension adjust that you have on that traditional style knob. Might be subjective, but just something that I look for. The third difference is in the handle arm length. You've got a 100 millimeter handle on the Coastal, and you've got a 90 millimeter handle on the Tatula. That increased length is going to feel more comfortable when you're throwing bigger lures or you're winching down on a bigger fish. It's just an ergonomic thing, not so much the overall performance of the reel itself. And then finally is the drag design on each reel, which is something that I think is kind of overlooked or not talked about either in the Daiwa catalog or online. So both incorporate Daiwa's Zion material in their star drag cap here on the side. Very lightweight. I think it's like 20% lighter than other carbon composites. But the grease used on their carbon fiber drag stack is different between both reels. Daiwa's still using the Ultimate Tournament drag grease on their Tatula SV, and they're using the newer Automatic Tournament drag grease on the Coastal. The biggest difference between the two is just the startup inertia and the lower drag setting capabilities of each of these reels. So it might require 2 or 2.5 pounds of pressure for, the line to slowly start peeling off smoothly on this type of reel. And the drag setting on this might, that threshold might be 1 pound on the Coastal. But honestly, for inshore saltwater fishing, I don't think it makes a bit of difference. We're talking about hard fighting fish like redfish and black drum and snook. You're not going to be running your drag setting that low in different scenarios. So I think it's a moot point. I think the drag structure and design of both reels are perfectly fine. Even though I do think the Coastal SV TW is a great bang for buck for a high performance inshore saltwater baitcaster, it isn't without flaws, or it isn't without areas of improvement, you know? There's two particular things about this model reel that I think are important to point out if you're considering buying a high-end baitcaster. The first being, yes, the MagForce brake system by Daiwa, this magnetic braking system, is great for reducing backlash, and the SV spool does help for better manipulation during the cast to increase some casting distance with certain lures. But by and large, if you were to compare a magnetic braking system to, let's say, a traditional centrifugal braking system where you can back those brakes off entirely, technically you could have increased casting distance, with other series of reels outside of Daiwa SV products. I don't know in the big scheme of things if that makes that much of a difference, but if you're the type of angler that wants the maximum casting distance possible, even when that dial is set to 0, there still is always some sort of force put on the spool, some sort of braking that's always going to be implemented. So that's just something to consider. And the other thing is small. And tell me in the comment section if you think this is just me or if you also feel this way. But the zero adjust knob or zero adjuster that Daiwa includes on some of their newer and higher end baitcasters, it is supposed to come from the manufacturer preset. And I will say I did need to preset this a little bit tighter, ever so slightly, to make sure that spool didn't move. Now, that's fine. I think even if it's a 99% preset, that's great. I think mission accomplished. But for me, I'm kind of privy to the traditional dial knobs on other baitcasters. I just think that it requires less effort to, scale back or tighten forward on those type of cast adjusters. So I will admit, this type of preset knob, it's recessed in, it's a little hard to get to, it's a little cumbersome. It does have kind of a beaded outside edge, so it does make it somewhat easy to grip, but it's a small area to grab to manipulate. So if they're going to move forward with the zero adjuster, I wish that they would bring it out ever so slightly so that it feels like you're grabbing the traditional cast control knob on previous renditions. So that about wraps it up, guys. I hope you enjoyed this overview of the Daiwa Coastal SV TW, all of the features and the specs of this reel, and kind of how it compares to other Daiwa reels in its same class. If you guys have used the Coastal before and you enjoy it, or you haven't tried it out and you have some questions, leave them down below here at the bottom of this video. We'd love to hear your thoughts and your experiences. And if you want to pick up a Coastal or a Tatula SV TW, we have both of these reels available at our online tackle shop, fishstrong.com. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and we will see you on the water soon. If you're new to Saltstrong, just know we're the best inshore fishing club that teaches you how to catch more redfish, sea trout, snook, and flounder. You save a ton of money on your tackle, and you meet a lot of awesome new fishing friends. So to learn more, head over to saltstrong.com, and we will see you in the Insider family soon.